Good morning. It is Wednesday. We are in between week one of college football and week two of college football, or you could say week one of college football and week one of NFL football. We are Gridiron 360. In case you didn't know, I'm Bill. I got Dave across from me. Say hi, Dave.
Good morning, folks.
We're going to recap today on this podcast the week one of college football. We will start with the early games, pre-Saturday games. Talk briefly about a few of them, just touch on them, some names that came up, and then we'll wrap it up with the Clemson Georgia Tech game, which was the big early game pre-Saturday. So let's start it out with Colorado State played. Not a huge game. Was an in-state rivalry, obviously. The Buffs beat Colorado State 52-31, and really just wanted to mention one name that stood out to me, and I think was mentioned a lot on the cast on the TV, was wide receiver out of Colorado, Laviska Shenault. Laviska Shenault Jr., number 2. This is a guy that is going to have NFL draft potential. Went about 100 all-purpose yards in a TD, so nothing crazy, but made big plays in the game. Again, I don't want to dwell on this game. I don't know how many fans we have of those teams, but just to drop a name, he went 3 for 35 rushing the ball, actually. Had about 11 and change a carry, and then had 3 receptions for 48 yards, 16-yard average for a TD. So, again, not blow-up numbers, about 100 all-purpose, but he's a name that folks should watch out for in the future. Potential wide receiver. Maybe your NFL team might be looking for one.
Yeah, definitely an offensive game. Just something to keep an eye on for you Buffalo fans was, Colorado State has historically been kind of a run option type team in the past, but they put up some serious yards. Actually, outgained Colorado, even though it was 52-31, but put up 374 yards in the air. So doesn't look like they're going to be a defensive juggernaut for the Pac-12 necessarily.
No. Quickly moving on. An ACC team also played. This was a Friday night game. The Wake Forest Demon Deacons played the Utah State Aggies. They pulled it out for our conference.
Yep.
I know Utah State isn't a big group of 5 school, one you may not know a lot about, and you may say, well, that's not great for Utah State. Folks, don't forget, there's a guy on Utah State, their quarterback, by the name of Jordan Love. I believe I don't know if he will be a Heisman candidate, a dark horse. Could be. Guy went 33 for 48, 416 yards, 3 TDs. Did have 3 picks in the game. But I can see what all the hype is about. Just his presence of mind, his awareness, the way he moves in the pocket. He's quick. He can run the ball, but he definitely is a guy when the pocket broke down was moving around in the pocket. I mean, he had his eyes downfield on a couple plays where, guys were falling at his feet and he was stepping through over those people on the ground, still keeping his eyes downfield. Glad to see the ACC came out strong with a win there for our conference. But again, it's Utah State's no slouch. You'll see by the end of the season that they're probably going to be pretty decent. And this Love kid, you can see what the hype is about him.
Sure, absolutely. And again, I'll kind of touch on the Wake side. Wake is going to give the ACC teams some fits offensively. Not a juggernaut on defense, but offense. I mean, Newman, their quarterback, went 34 for 47 for 400 yards and 3 TDs. So they ran, I'm used to the Grove misdirection. I'm used to some of those challenges that they pose. They try to catch you on defense over pursuing. Not as much of that as I've seen in the past, but still able to draw up some good game plan out there. And another guy that I love, this guy. He is just a tiny little sledgehammer, and by tiny I mean in height, not in size. Is Carney, the running back for Wake Forest? Man, that
You got
kid-
measurables on him?
I will get them shortly, but I will tell you, this kid caught the ball, handled the ball well, ran into contact, and did some serious damage. Like, I was just very, very impressed with this kid. He's gonna be a pain in the ass. That's the best way I can describe him for everybody that plays him. And he's the kind of guy you love on your team, just fearless. So just I would, those were the two things I came away with. And then Surratt, and you can kind of touch on him, but he had a pretty big game too as well.
Yeah, and those are the two guys I think to look at. These aren't young guys; they're veteran guys on that team. So even though Carney is the tailback, he reminds me of a fullback. I mean, he's like kind of like that like he's just
Little
a
old
tough
school.
little guy. Yeah, it's very cool. He ended up having 25. I mean, he toted the rock, man, 25 times. You talk about the Newman, the quarterback, throwing the ball for 21 or. Sorry, throwing the ball for how much did you say? 47 times he threw it. Carney toted the rock 25 times for 105 yards. Pretty good. He also had a catch for 6. Surratt on the on the receiving side for Wake Forest, number 14, had 7 receptions, 158 yards in TD. He's a stud.
Yep.
His name's called often in Wake Forest games. So those are a couple guys that I would keep an eye on in those games. We had Wisconsin. South Florida. Interesting.
We had this one wrong. We, in one sense, we did think USF was going to be able to give them a game, just given the weather, and let's just say that did not happen.
No, they got their and based on the fact that they've been fairly decent in their conference, especially with the team right up the way in Central Florida. The national champs, 2-3 years over. So, but they've had to contend with them, and they've played them well over the years. So, yeah, we did have it wrong. It was 49-0.
Yeah. Let's just say Wisconsin did Wisconsin things.
It was, whatever happened last year with Wisconsin, I have no idea. But this is the Wisconsin we saw 2 years ago, in my mind. They looked real good. They looked real good.
And don't, it's really going to depend on Wisconsin winning, but, the true standout in this game was who they expected, which was the running back Taylor from Wisconsin. Here's what I'll say. He's more north-south, but you get that kid to the second level, he goes to the sidelines, and no one's catching him. No one. I was very impressed with the way he ran the ball.
There was, there's all this talk about the preseason Heisman race. It's a quarterback-heavy race, and I got to be honest, some of them showed out, even though some of them showed out in losses, but several running backs this week that were potential Heisman, going to be looked at for the Heisman, I think ran themselves in the conversation. Jonathan Taylor being one of them. 16 carries, 135 yards, 2 TDs on the ground. Had 2 receptions for 48 yards and 2 TDs through the air. So went nuts. He went nuts. They leaned heavy on him because the quarterback, Cone, only had 199 yards on 26 attempts. So they leaned on the run game, and it paid off.
And let's give Taylor all his credit, but their backup running back Watson ran 14 times for 80 yards, which is over 5 yards a carry plus a touchdown.
Yep.
So the offensive line, the big uglies that you expect.
That's what I was hoping you
We're
talk
big
about.
and ugly.
Yeah, I mean that's it. That's Wisconsin. They've again. I don't know what happened to them last year, but it seems like they're getting back to form, and we'll talk about some of the other games of teams on that side of the Big Ten, the West. But at this point, I wasn't sure, but now I think I'm sure. I mean, in Wisconsin, I know it's just UCF, but they went to town, and they could be the team of that side of the Big Ten.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
So another one, just a quick one to look at that unfortunately did not. We had hopes that the Holy War would be a little bit of a battle, Utah versus BYU. I have to say, I walked away from the game. I don't think it was Utah's best performance,
No.
but BYU was not really.
No, they kept it a game in the first quarter and a half, maybe. Maybe you could go say first half. I expect nothing less. I've said before on these podcasts about the coach for Utah, Whittingham. I think he's a great coach, and obviously adjustments were made in the right fashion at halftime, and the second half was all Utah.
Yep.
So, I mean, it is a rivalry, but it was a rivalry, like I said, maybe for a quarter and a half, and then Utah ran away with it. But to your point, you said it before, overreactions on the first week. Utah didn't look phenomenal, but I think they'll get better.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
What else we got, buddy?
I think, and I'll turn the first half of this game over to you,
Okay.
which the first half is Clemson playing Georgia Tech. Not an expectation that Georgia Tech was going to give a lot to Clemson. I think there were some interesting storylines, certainly still in the game, even though it played out as most people expected. Tech just didn't have the ponies on there. But I saw some interesting things, particularly on the Clemson side, and then some encouraging things on the Tech side. So why don't you talk about your boys up there in Clemson, South Carolina?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, everybody's right now talking about Trevor not looking so good. From a stat line, 13 to 23 passing, 168 yards, a TD, and 2 picks. Keep in mind, one of the picks was literally with time running out in the half, and he was getting chased opposite way out of the pocket, and he just chucked one to see if someone could make a play. But he's a smart kid. He wouldn't have done that if there was more time on the clock. He knew we were running into the half. Yep. He was just chucking it up. So take that as you will. He was off on his throws. Now, I guess to his credit, post-game pressers said that they did some things disguising their coverages that fooled him a little bit. And for first game of the year, you want to work out the kinks. They didn't rush as many people and drop more people back. So they played the game of, hey, if we're going to stop a piece of the offense, we're going to try to stop Trevor.
Yep.
Because my man, number 9, Travis Etienne, another guy being talked about for potential Heisman, overshadowed by all the weapons in Trevor, ran himself right into it, went crazy. Now, keep in mind, Travis does, in a lot of games, take a minute. He gets a couple carries, you're not getting a lot of yards, maybe a yard, maybe 2, maybe get a tackle for loss. He just got to kind of get it going. And then he broke off a big one.
At a key point.
At a key point, and then fumbled the ball. Now, they reviewed it. Questionable. Okay, it was a fumble. They called it. I think they ruled it that he was down, and they overturned it, is what it was. From that point on, it was all day TE. All day Travis Etienne. He ended up going 12 carries for 205 yards, 3 TDs, and he had only 1 reception for 3 yards, but he went crazy. Most of those yards, he'd get through. 12 carries that's 17.1 a clip. He'd get through that line. You can't, if you don't stop him with that front, he's gone. His vision's great. He's a great cutback, see the hole, and once he sees it, his burst is like no one else. He just goes. So he looked great. All of our backs looked great. We got all of them. And Lynn J. Dixon, our second string, number 23, had 64 yards on 8 carries and a TD. He was breaking stuff off. So
Clemson had 400-plus yards on the ground in total. So
yeah. It was obvious that Tech was into stopping the passing game, and they did. Now, Trevor did have a nice long throw where T. Higgins made a phenomenal play. It was like a 50-yard TD catch. But that's just what those guys do. But for the most part, the receivers were held in check. So it was a run game for us. I'll let you talk a little bit about Tech. I think that what we talked about in the pregame cast, we didn't know what to expect out of Tech's offense. I think defensively, they obviously did. We didn't know exactly. They did some things that fooled us. I don't think it was rocket science. I just don't think we were first game. We weren't super ready. But on Tech's offense, we really didn't know what they were going to do with the new coach talking about one go or spread type offense and having the personnel for more of a triple option run game offense. So why don't you talk a little bit about Tech?
Well, real quick before I get into Tech, I do want to add a couple of points from an outside perspective of Clemson, because Bill touched on the real critical points, but something I'd like to add is, and this should scare the hell.
Yeah, thank you.
Because it does
I know
scare
where
the
you're
hell
going.
out of the defenses in the ACC was how well Trevor Lawrence ran in that game.
Yep.
And it's not about him, Kyler Murraying all over the place and taking off and running 90 yards. His runs were well-timed. They were breakdowns. One, I believe, it looked like a design run.
Yeah, the wrinkles are going to add more for him to run because he can run.
Yeah.
He's big.
He definitely showed his ability to not only move in the pocket, which I think we kind of already knew, but he showed an ability to gain first downs with his legs. But what I even more so what I liked about what I saw from him was that he did not put himself in harm's way in doing it, and that's critical in football.
Yep. He ran out of bounds like perfectly.
Yes.
I mean, like his vision was good. And I don't mean to interrupt, but you're right. I'm glad you touched on it. Again, you look at his stat line and you're like, yeah, what happened there? But if you watch the game, things like that he did that haven't been as prevalent, not a main part, they're definitely trying to add that wrinkle.
Sure.
That's where I think he had a better game than people see on the stat line.
He's the quarterback. He ran the game. He controlled the game. I never felt like he was out of control. It wasn't like, oh, my God, let's go away from Trevor Lawrence. It was just the game plan they were able to run, and he stayed within it. He's not up there trying to pad his stats. He could have thrown for 400 yards in this game. Anybody that's going to question whether Trevor Lawrence can sling the rock, good luck to you. I want to see how that works out for you at the end of the year because I'm not betting on it working out well. So that was really good. The other part is I want some fingerprinting done on the defensive line because I want identification because I'm pretty sure you guys didn't draft anybody last year because their defensive line dominated like nobody's business. It was next man up and over. They just your guy number 3.
Oh, yeah. The X-Man, Xavier Thomas.
Xavier Thomas, he was looking for him. He wasn't even out there in the first, I think, series.
I don't know.
And
it was weird. I had said to you, I didn't know if he was in trouble, but it was the first defensive series he was in out, and it was halfway through our second. Now, keep in mind, he's DN. One thing that, obviously losing Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, and then our DNs in Austin Bryant and Cleveland Farrell. That's our 4-man front.
Yep.
We went to a 3-man front that first defensive series, and we switched it out throughout the game. Got back to what we do with the 4, but we did do that, and that's a direct result of losing those guys based on the personnel that we had.
Yep.
Now, that's why I think you didn't see X-Man until the second series because he plays D-end or they'll drop him to an outside backer.
when he came in, it was ugly.
It was. Now,
Not just him, but it was ugly.
There's a guy that we talked about players to watch that I neglected to mention that my Clemson cohort, Matt Skubik, who's been on here before, did mention me off air even prior to that, and I still didn't mention him. He needs to be mentioned. He needs to be mentioned. Number 13, true freshman, Tyler Davis. Okay? Watch out. I loved Christian. Love Christian Wilkins. This guy he as a true freshman at D tackle was wreaking havoc. I mean, he was just manhandling the line from the inside. He's let's see, I think he's 6'2", about 300, and he plays with leverage, and he can't be stopped. As a true freshman, it's going to be scary. It's going to be scary. So that's a guy I do want to give a shout out to. My man, Tyler Davis, number 13, true freshman. I love you, buddy. I love you. I love our past guys. You are going to make us forget about those superstars real quick. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and also just to kind of sum it up, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Jackets because I think there was some good things over on their team. The Tigers did some things we expected them to do, and the things that I would say that they've got to clean up or work on are things that we expect big things out of. Again, we mentioned the passing game. I think he didn't play as well, Trevor Lawrence, in the first half as we normally see him play. But the reality was Clemson did what a smart team would do, and that's they played the game plan that was working, and that was awesome on the part of Clemson.
We will do that. Okay. We got a little. It wasn't Hurricane Dorian. Got some sort of siren. We had to pause. Okay. So I'll let you talk a little more about Tech. One thing I did want to say on the defensive side of the ball for Tech, Pat Swilling's kid.
Yep.
That kid was all right. I thought he looked pretty good. Now, the Tech people, they're a little smarter than the turnover chain or the Dora backpack, but they had some sort of whiteboard going on where they were throwing up Twitter handles whenever somebody made a play or a turnover.
It was a turnover. I didn't have a problem with that. You make a turnover, you can write it down. I don't think it wasn't. I don't think it was a show. I think what they're trying to do is get them to. They want to get them to create some sense of accomplishment, which is important for a team that's in the situation that they're in.
Yeah, so that kid was pretty good. But anyways, I digress. Go ahead and talk a little bit about Tech's offense, what you think, what you saw.
Okay, so on the offensive side of the ball, their quarterback, Oliver, he can run the ball. Unfortunately for them, he cannot throw. They really struggled trying to get any passing game going. I mean, they moved the ball on Clemson a little bit, particularly earlier in the game. So there was some encouraging signs, but if they can't have run and pass, they're going to struggle. And I think some of that goes back to what we talked about when we took a look at this game before the game, and it's can they, with their recruits, change their system. I like the fact that the coach, I think, did as much as he could with those players. The second guy they brought in, Johnson, did nothing for me. Had one run for 1 yard and 2 incomplete passes. But I will say, and I take this with a grain of salt, but a little less salt than normal, is the kid that came in third, Graham. He threw the ball well. He threw a nice TD pass. He seemed much more comfortable in the pocket. I believe he's a freshman. Mm-hmm. So that was encouraging. I'm curious to see if he gets a shot against against maybe the top defenses as they go forward. So I thought he threw the ball nicely. Their running game was there. Mason ran the ball pretty well. Was pretty effective. Had a touchdown, 72 yards. So he averaged 5 yards a carry. I think some of that was playing off the fact that when Oliver was able to run, Oliver snapped some big plays, but also got caught behind the line of scrimmage several times. Mm-hmm. And that's again part of Clemson's defense. What you really noticed more than anything is when you looked at him man for man, this size difference on the line in particular, but really across the field. Was noticeable. So I think that just they automatically were in a little bit of hurt there. I think defensively, again, they gave up some big plays where they shot themselves in the foot a few times. Was timely bad plays, poor tackling at the wrong moment, but they got Clemson into some predictable downs. And again, it was the Jimmies and the Joes. They just don't have the firepower to hang with Clemson, but I thought they did some creative things. And again, you can see one of the things that Bill touched on was Trevor Lawrence throwing 2 picks. One of them was, it's kind of just a whatever kind of play, but but they did throw some confusion for one of the best quarterbacks we've seen in college football come out and say, they did some things that threw some confusion. I think that bodes well for what the coaching staff did. I want to give some kudos to the coaching staff. It's a tough situation. I mean, there's not many teams nowadays because they're not running that type of offense that Paul Johnson ran where you really need to recruit for 3 years. I see it with his team, but I also, again, very encouraged by what I saw. It looked like he adapted to his players, which is the mark of a good coach to me.
Sure. And all around for the ACC, it's similar to the Miami, even though they lost, there were some encouraging things for them there in that loss. against, well, what was an 8th-ranked Florida team. But the same thing for Tech. I think they'll get back to where they, I mean, the good fortune for them is they're in the Coastal. They're on the other side. Yep. So right now, as most know, the ACC Coastal's usually wide open every year. It's somebody different.
Yep.
I guess overall takeaways from me, since I am a Clemson fan. First game for Trevor. I anticipate it'll get better. The offensive line looked great. He did have time. I mean, and he had big pockets. Again, Tyler Davis on the defense. I think that we are good there. A little concerned about the linebacking core. Those guys need to grow up, but our secondary is great. Our running game is phenomenal. Travis Etienne will keep going. What I think I was happiest about was when we turned the ball over in our territory and it was 1st and goal from like the 1. And we saw a lot of this last year. People could move up and down the field at times, but once we got them into the red zone and that field starts to shrink, they have problems. And that was very evident. Not only did we stuff them, we moved them back, and then we got a pick on 4th down for them trying to go for it on touchdown. So I was very impressed. That's stuff I saw last year, that with a majority of a lot of new guys in there, they're still playing the form, and that's a credit Coach Venables.
Yep, absolutely. Clemson does nothing in my mind to make me think that they won't be there at the end of the year in week 1. And again, the things that I saw are certainly things that would not alarm me from a cleanup perspective at all. And there was definitely some bright spots in some somewhat questioned areas. I mean, we've seen how Clemson's recruited. So I think they're worth the time to talk about because they are the real deal. Yep. They're going to bring it. And so it's and what's going to be interesting in our last game here to talk about.
Pre-Saturday game.
Yeah, pre-Saturday is the A&M Texas State. And the big point of touching that is because the big game this week for the ACC and SEC for that matter, is Texas A&M traveling to Clemson. Texas A&M, I think, kind of did what people expected them to do. Kellen Mond had a solid game for them.
Mm-hmm. Threw 3 TDs.
Yep. So, and Corbin, their running back, was all over the place, both in the running game, but also in the passing game too as well.
Not just him. They had between number 7 Corbin and number 28 Spiller.
Yep.
So they had just under 209 yards, under 210. 106 for Spiller on 7 carries.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, they ran for well over 7 yards a carry.
And Mond also had 5 carries for 25 yards, so 5 yards a clip, and one of those was a touchdown. So he accounted for 4 touchdowns of the 41 points they had. So they look good. We'll talk more about the preview for this week in another segment coming up. But, yeah, it's going to be a game. I said it before. If there's a game, you asked if there's a game you're going to lose. And then I think I said the game if we're going to lose, that I want to lose, and then the game that I think we're going to lose, the game I want to lose would be Texas A&M, just because then I believe we'll turn it on and we'll go take care of business at Syracuse. Yeah. But, Syracuse still concerns me. I don't want to dwell too much on it. Let's take a moment here and get our bearings together, and then we're going to dive into the Saturday slate. The early games, afternoon, the night games, and then we'll right at the end touch on the Sunday night matchup and the Monday night matchup.